Hello, friends, and welcome to my midweek meditation, in which we're going through the book of Revelation. Today's passage is chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. If this is your first time joining, or if you happen to miss last week's meditation, I encourage you to go back and watch that one first. It will help you understand the introduction I'm going to give to today's passage. I have been using this seven-sided figure to show that the book of Revelation contains 7 sections. Each section gives us a view of the whole of the last days, which are all of the days between the 2 advents of Jesus. So far, each section has contained 7 items or actions. We have seen 7 letters to 7 churches. We have seen 7 seals being opened, and we have seen the sounding of 7 trumpets. The more views we see, the more we learn about the last days. Today, we enter the 4th section of the book of Revelation, which begins at chapter 12, verse 1, and goes all the way to the end of chapter 14. It is very clear that this section is once again giving us a view of the whole of the last days. I want to show you that. Listen to how the section begins. Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2 say, "And a great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth." We are going to learn that the child is Jesus. So this section clearly starts with the first advent of Jesus, his birth. And now, listen to how the section ends. Revelation chapter 14, verse 14 says, "Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand." This is a vision of Jesus, the King of Kings. He holds a sickle because when he comes the second time, he is going to come to reap all of his people. He is going to come to separate the wheat from the chaff. So this section of Revelation clearly gives us a view of the whole of the last days, from the first advent of Jesus to his second advent, his return. Now, since the other sections have involved 7 items or actions, you might be wondering about this 4th section. Does it also contain 7 items or actions? And the answer is, it does. They are not numbered, but they are present. Scholar Vern Poythress, in his commentary on Revelation, calls them 7 symbolic histories, which is helpful terminology. Here is what the histories involve: the dragon, the woman, the first beast, the second beast, the 144,000, the angelic proclaimers, and the Son of Man. We will be looking at those histories in the coming weeks. Today, I want to explain to you the introduction, which is chapter 12, verses 1 through 6. "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant, and she was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. These verses introduce us to three characters: the woman, the dragon, and the child, specifically a male child. Now, who are these characters? Well, the dragon is clearly identified as Satan in chapter 12, verse 9. We will get to that verse next week. The child is ultimately Jesus. The word ultimately is important because there are some other births in view in this vision. This vision concerns many male children leading up to Jesus. And the woman is ultimately Mary. And again, the word ultimately is important because there are some other births in view. This vision concerns many women giving birth to male children, the last of which is Mary. I will explain to you what I'm talking about by taking you to Genesis chapter 3. The chapter begins with the fall. And then we hear God curse the serpent, the woman Eve, and the man Adam. Listen to what he says to the serpent and to the woman Eve. Quote, "The Lord God said to the serpent, 'Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.' To the woman he said, 'I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you.'" Verse 15 is the first proclamation of the gospel. The offspring is Jesus, who would crush the serpent's head through the cross. Now, Satan clearly heard that proclamation of the gospel because it was declared to him. So, what event do you think Satan was watching for after the curse? Answer: he was watching for a special male child to be born, which is exactly what the vision in Revelation tells us. Revelation chapter 12, verse 4 tells us that he, Satan, waited for the woman to give birth so that he could devour the child. We see that happen throughout the Old Testament. I'll give you some of the main examples. First of all, a godly son, Abel, was born. And what happened to Abel? Well, Satan moved Cain to kill Abel. Satan was after the child. We also see this in Joseph. Joseph was a godly young man who pleased his father. So what did Satan do? He moved his brothers to throw Joseph into the pit, leaving him for dead. And of course, they ended up selling him to Egypt. But the point is that Satan was trying to remove Joseph. Later in Egypt, the Israelites became great in number. Many women were giving birth. The Israelites were becoming so great in size. Pharaoh was worried, and of course Satan was as well. He was right to be worried because during this time Moses was born. So what did Satan do? He moved Pharaoh to have all the male children killed. He was trying to devour the child. Now, that event with Moses is very similar to what happened when Jesus was born. When Jesus was born, Satan knew something was happening. He saw the Magi come looking for the King of the Jews who was born. So what did Satan do? He moved Herod to have all the male children killed. He was seeking to devour the child. Satan is the dragon. The woman is ultimately Mary. And the male child is ultimately Jesus. What we are learning from this vision is that there has been a very real conflict occurring ever since the fall. Satan has wanted to destroy Christ. Satan did, of course, succeed in killing Jesus on the cross, but that event turned out to be the event that crushed his head. Jesus rose from the dead. He is our victorious King. Satan, however, continues to attack, and therefore, we are not living during a time of peace. We are living during a time of war. We're going to continue to learn about that next week. Today, I encourage you to take comfort in the truth that Jesus conquered the grave and reigns. He will rule all the nations. He is with his Father on his throne. That is a great verse from our passage to meditate on. Thank you for joining me. Have a great week.